welcome to SHOWstudio. It's our last menswear discussion of the season, so it's a sad day in some respects, but it's a happy day because I have an amazing set of panellists with me to help discuss what we saw in beautiful City of Lights. But before we get going and start picking apart the shows of the season, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with you, Simon.
Hi, I'm Simon Chilvers from matchesfashion.com.
I'm Helen Seamons from The Guardian and The Observer.
I'm Charlie Porter, I'm the men's fashion critic for the Financial Times.
Simon, I'm going to pick on you first because you're sat next to me. What was your standout show of Paris?
I think it would have to be Raf Simons because it's the one that I've been thinking about most since. So I think you always do this thing after the shows when you get on the Eurostar and you sort of download your brain a bit, and I just kept going back to that. And I think also because I've been to see the collection in the showroom that day as well, and you kind of, when you get up close and you see all the detail in the clothes and the pictures of his parents, and you find that sort of story, just really, I don't know, I just thought, how can you go from the Sterling Ruby collaboration, which was so amazing, to like a show which was even as amazing? It was kind of, I don't know, and I think also the experience of the show was so brilliant as well, like the fact that there was no seating and the models were coming out at different times and you were trying to kind of spot what was happening. Just the whole thing just felt like a real fashion moment, and it really stuck in my head for ages afterwards.
I think it's interesting what you say about the seating, because obviously there's two things to talk about with Raf, isn't there? There's the clothes themselves and there's the way he's presented, because I think a lot has been made of how he's kind of challenging or subverting, however you want to put it, sort of the fashion system, and particularly last season doing that kind of, I'm going to do a collaboration, I'm going to kind of rename my brand for a season, I'm going to sell it completely sort of through a new site, and then to show in a way that was also kind of subverting a different side of the fashion system by taking out those hierarchies. It did feel quite exciting.
It's really weird looking at this collection on image, straight on imagery,
totally different.
Because our experience of the show, we all stood up and the models came out here obviously in a straight line, but as soon as they got past the photographers, it went wonky, and there was a gaffer tape path around this room. And we were just told to stand behind the gaffer tape, so you had no idea where was good and where was bad. And you saw someone like standing over there, it's like, oh, the New York Times were over there, maybe they've been told to stand in that, you had no idea where you should be. And also the lighting, I don't know quite how they got perfect lighting, but as soon as the show started, the lights went red and green, I think. I was in a very red area. So you were literally having to really peer at the clothes and to work out what they were. And like Simon said, they came out randomly, and once they were out, they kind of kept walking. So you saw the same look, but going in a different direction.
I think lots of people probably got very different views because there were certain looks that I definitely saw at least
loads of times.
10 times, and some that I saw twice. So I wondered.
But the key thing as well about looking at it here is actually you're only seeing half the collection, because if you stop there, and that coat with the red collar, on the back of that is a kind of sailor's flap. And on the back of these coats were images of like his family, so his parents, or images of Raf when he was younger, then images from sci-fi, images from horror films, and then also the key one was images of oil rigs either in like working order or burning. And it seemed because I went to the showroom too, and they were saying that it was about like it was a real kind of a thing about desolation of nature and destruction. It was actually quite a kind of heavy collection.
I think there was a real darkness to it. It was quite menacing. I found it quite unsettling and interesting because you didn't know when you were going to see the models again. It was that feeling, when you're in a busy room and you're trying to avoid someone. It was that kind of thing. When you're
like, you can just see there those are photos of his family that appeared on the front of some shirts, and so on the back of the other pieces there were this kind of weird kind of mix, seemingly random, and also like there was Japanese script and lots of images from Japan, and the Japanese script read Raf Simons, and that was meant to be a thank you to Japan for supporting him 20 years ago in his early days.
And also the trainers lit up.
There was a bit of controversy whether they were working.
Were they working or not? If they were
whether it was meant to just be one shoe. I think it was.
I thought that they didn't also quite know how they're going to get the battery in them when they produced them. So I don't know if they've solved that. But no, it's also interesting that there were things from the Raf Sterling collection that actually then carried through to this. There's a knit that we've already seen that's like a blue knit that's almost like TV interference, which is pretty much exactly the same as a piece that will be going on sale now. So it's not like that one just there. That appeared in Raf and Sterling. So it's not as if it's like Raf and Sterling was a separate thing over here, and now we're going to go back to normal or whatever. It was almost like Raf Sterling was a new start for us.
Yeah,
but I think that's what was interesting. Sorry, what you
no, I was going to say it's like a continuation. Also with those scrapbooky images, the T-shirts that are out now from.
Yeah, like this one.
Yeah, exactly. Modelled by Charlie.
Yeah.
Modelled by Charlie.
Yeah.
Model Zone.
Yeah, yeah. People sometimes think that's a biscuit, but I think it's a planet.
What, a biscuit in your pocket?
Yeah, a biscuit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like people always think of Raf as being a very sort of revolutionary designer, but there is so much continuation in what he does, and often, I think more than most designers, he has these really particular pieces, and that's
like that one there, the sleeveless jacket is a real kind of Raf standard.
And I love the fact that when you got up close to the clothes in the show, and I think Charlie's point about the fact that you only saw half the collection, which I sort of also loved about the show, because actually, you know, now that things are so out there to everybody so quickly after the show happens with social media and everything, there is still something about being at the show that you can't have unless you've been at the show. And I think there was a bit of a point somehow about that for me, about that collection. It was, you know, that this show itself was a really important part of what he was saying. And I think the personal feeling for him about this collection, and with the thank you to the Japanese thing, and also having his parents in there, I think perhaps also if he's working at Dior, which is obviously his other job, which is a huge, he has to do the Dior thing, even though it's the Raf Dior thing. This is like that kind of thing for him to be able to channel all those other more personal design ideas into. And even just like when you get up close to the clothes, and just some of the details are like those coats with the like 5 buttons are brilliant, because you can open them and then you can have 1, but you can have 4. The way it's designed is like they're little slots, so you can, it's like you could also just have 1. And I just love those kinds of things that, you know, they're so thought through, and it just always feels like it's a sort of really clever mix of like fashion, but like clothes that you actually just want to wear because they're kind of fascinating.
I think the interesting thing as well is how personal it is, because it's personal literally because Raf himself, the image appears on the shirt, but also it's personal in terms of a designer who gets to his 40s and is a designer who has always worked within youth and youth subcultures and understanding subcultures, and how you continue on with your same beliefs and same fascinations as a man in your 40s. And I think that was the kind of eloquence of it, was that he managed to express himself personally and then sentimentally as well, looking back at his family, but also doing something that felt very modern and very forward. Because, you know, maybe you can then look back at what he did in his early days and see it as more literal, like using kind of Joy Division stuff, or it was connecting literally to youth culture things, whereas this is moving somewhere else.
I'm interested in what we were talking about with this idea of sort of re-establishing the show, because I do think, I read it I think taking away the benches, it was almost trying to sort of, there's an element of celebrating the show and the wonderful sort of experience of going to a show, but also I feel like it was slightly about making you feel lucky to be there. It was taking out that kind of hierarchy. You know, a lot of shows it feels like the PR teams, the designers are almost kind of apologising to you, and they're wooing you and they want you to be there, and they're massaging your egos, whereas that was really removed from this.
This forced you to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that he is deliberately trying to sort of question fashion systems by doing things like the Sterling movie thing and this, or do you think that's just him just doing what he wants to do?
I mean, like, I think he is, but as part of what he does. I mean, like, the thing is Raf loves fashion. Like, you know, he very much is connected to fashion. He doesn't want to destroy fashion. I think actually maybe what he's doing by making it show is he's actually preserving fashion. He's actually maintaining the idea of fashion as a thing of importance. It's not a kind of thing of like, oh no, you don't matter, you're irrelevant, I don't like you. It's actually, it was a very intense experience. The music was Under the Skin as well, from Under the Skin, which actually I hadn't seen. It was one of those kind of real SWAT things that some people, I was like, yeah, you know, the music was from Under the Skin. It's like, oh, okay. Good. I've since gone and seen it, you know, but so the room got real menace and real tension about it, and which then makes you think it was a pleasure to write about, you know, because it provoked you.
It had suspense.
Yeah.
Like it had that filmicness about it. You know, we were all standing, those weird lights. The boys were coming around and we didn't know when they were coming. They were pictured. You know, it had suspense, and it was a fashion show. It wasn't just a load of clothes walking up and down on good-looking men.
But I like
it
that
was
contrast.
a show. It really felt like that.
And also there was the personal story as well of like the photo that's of Raf that was taken at his graduate collection, I think, and he was wearing a T-shirt that was by Willie, or I think it was a Willie's T-shirt who made it, and backstage Tim Blanks was backstage when Willie came up to Raf with the actual T-shirt, or Raf gave it to Willie, or someone did something with a T-shirt, but there was that this real sense of family and what they've been through and where they've come from,
which is that really interesting contradiction, isn't it, between the show feeling quite threatening and cinematic and scary and almost menacing, but then the clothes being so personal and kind of that softness because they were so emotional. I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Helen, what were your standouts? Because I'm conscious we're going to do a Craig Green and just talk about
exactly.
Helen, what did you like?
Loewe, Jonathan Anderson for Loewe, I absolutely loved it.
What struck you so much about it?
I think the simplicity of it, how it's quite hard with those like older leather houses to make it really current and really cool, and it just has that X factor you can't quite quantify why it's so amazing, but every single piece you're just blown away. I absolutely love those jeans with the thick turn-ups. They had this book that came that everybody was given a lookbook. Beautiful photo shoot by Jamie Hawksworth.
Yeah.
It just kind of sold the whole story of it to you as soon as you got in there, and everything kind of backed that up. And it's such a brand overhaul, like the new logo, everything.
The crucial point about it is that it's a Spanish house that LVMH bought whenever LVMH bought it.
Yeah.
And previously it's always been designed in Madrid.
Yeah.
So it's always been a kind of, like Stuart Vevers was there and was doing fashion there, but it was still based in Madrid and was a Spanish label. And Jonathan has moved it to Paris. And this was actually the first day in the new headquarters. That's what that building was. So it's allowing him to do fashion there and allowing to build a brand that feels more global and more part of a global fashion language rather than a Spanish house with some nice fashion attached to it. And it was very, very deft and very clever and an immediate idea of a brand. And one of the cleverest things they did is put blankets in the show, and it's like, so these pictures actually don't do it justice particularly because it's a presentation which we sometimes go to at these shows where we go to an appointment in someone's showroom, but all around all these platforms they had all these blankets and they were amazing, and it totally connected you with a world of Loewe that was more than just here are the clothes and here are the bags. It immediately felt like a kind of luxury world you wanted to be in, and in this kind of period where luxury is really elusive and kind of hard to work out what if something actually is luxury, it did feel like genuine luxury.
I think it was, sorry, you go.
And also luxury fashion.
Yeah.
Like it felt like it had a fashion factor to it, which I think is obviously something that he's very good at doing. But I sort of just, you know, it's simple, some of those simple pieces, but just in really luxury fabrics, but with a fashion thing, like those jeans with the one, you know, like it felt really effortless. And in a way, I sort of felt it's a bit like when Kim Jones went to Louis Vuitton and just gave it a complete, like made that menswear just feel sort of modern, and I really felt current. That's what he did with this. Like it just felt modern. It had some really good accessories. I loved the blankets too. I don't know, and like that amazing shoe that sort of just gave, you know, just kind of gave it this kind of quirkiness, but obviously it is super luxe as well.
I disagree that everything was perfect though. I don't think it was. Like the shirt we saw just a second ago that was kind of off kilter, that doesn't really work for me. And but then there are pieces like, if you go back one more as well, like that knit there, Jonathan was really proud of that because he said he'd always wanted to do a ribbed, coloured knit, and it's really hard to do, and like it takes being somewhere like that, and they were able to develop the ideas. So there's lots of stuff that really did work in it, and I think it's a really interesting starting point for them to develop. He said that there'll be a women's catwalk show.
Yeah, they're going to be.
But men's, I think, is going to be this kind of thing of a growing world,
Yeah.
like this, where it feels more like a wardrobe. I also thought the Meccano was too soon after Balenciaga.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
It's interesting what you say about the women's catwalk, because that was kind of my concern, because I thought it was so interesting what Helen was saying about it feeling like it was a total brand rejuvenation and turnover, but then I thought it was done in this kind of wonderfully traditional way, by the fact there were all the billboards around Paris and that book, there was something quite old school about it. And then I worried that with a catwalk, that kind of sense of a brand overhaul done in this kind of relatively, I know it was done in a huge kind of big way that all the billboards were covered, it was quite an old school modest way.
But actually the billboards weren't old school at all, they were very new, because the day of the show or the day after the show, spring summer 15 went on sale in summer 2014. Exactly. So actually this stuff, some of this stuff is in the shoe market now. So this stuff has gone in stores. So actually they were advertising it to a public to buy it. So it was nice for us to have a message about it. But they're being canny about, let's get this stuff in stores now. Like they're being modern in the way they're thinking about stuff.
I think it was also interesting how he had used the archive. I think he had been quite deferential in some ways. I know it felt very modern, but a lot of the pieces were very signature Louis Vuitton. I think that's always interesting when you see a designer like that being given that archive and an opportunity to kind of to move between the two.
Yeah.
Let's talk. Sorry, go.
No, that's it. No.
Yeah. So we liked it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's go to Louis Vuitton, because you mentioned Kim Jones, and I think it's interesting to talk about taking a very, very luxury heritage house and doing something that feels really modern, because this collection had a really great response to it, and I think a lot of people said that it felt very like old school Kim in a way. What did you think? What was your take on it, Helen?
I did really like this one. It's not my favourite one that he's done, Louis Vuitton, but the kind of reworking of the V motif that went throughout, I like that, and the really bright injection of that really hot pink that comes further through, and the whole the travel thing that he always brings to it and takes from the house. This one was about India and Rajasthan, and using that pink, which Diana Reeland said was like the navy blue of India. Some of it, I don't know how I feel about that. I love it, but I don't know how I think it.
Well, that's the Louis Vuitton customer, isn't it? The Louis Vuitton customer is a man with a lot of money. I mean, they've got a menswear customer who could buy that, and then also buy a super traditional suit.
Yeah.
Like, they've got a very broad customer there. I mean, the thing is, that's so Kim from like London, all those shows in Paris when he was doing his own label. I thought they were so amazing. And then there was a bomber jacket a little bit earlier in the show. Yeah, the flights. Obviously, I love any jumpsuits. So I love
the jumpsuits.
They're amazing.
Do men actually wear jumpsuits though? Do you find that at matches? Is there a market for jumpsuits? Or?
Well, I don't think it's like a bestseller.
Yeah. It's a niche customer, maybe.
We need to get men in jumpsuits.
It's one of those things. It's funny because it's quite a masculine thing. It's utility. I don't know why it's not something that.
Because it's also quite sexual to step into it. Like it's the most like a thing, like a dress that you wear. Like I wear them all the time.
I would really like to see them take off. I think
but if it was the bomber jacket down there, this one, which also then came in orange as well, and it's so clever, that piece, because like it's the sort of thing that could sell to a 50-year-old CEO who's got a yacht and whatever. But then this version in orange totally refers back to 80s clubland, the thing that Kim collects, and Kim is a great kind of supporter of keeping that world alive. I think that the interesting thing with Louis Vuitton is it's one of the few brands that can use the word luxury, because the amount of development he puts in, and the places they go with the collection and the things they do with it. Like, one of those models is wearing a ring that is like a sundial that you can tell the time with or something. And it's completely irrelevant. Like I checked, and it was written on the program notes, sundial ring, and one of them is wearing it. Who cares? Apart from they care to do it,
But it's like all the mirrors that are on that, that shisha embroidery. All the mirrors have a little LV,
and they're all dégradé as well. They're two colour. They're going down.
So it's something that just they care to do it.
Yeah, exactly. But if you go into Louis Vuitton and you want to buy Louis Vuitton, then you will spend that much money on that thing. So it's one of the few brands that can use the word luxury and say it without going luxury and it really just being some stuff made in the factory. You know, it's and also we're going to see. It's interesting when we see something so much that we don't even look at it anymore. But like, it's one of the many shows that did luxury sneakers, and like they are the thing that sells most in the universe, right? I mean, they're like
they're flying out the door.
Yeah. I mean, luxury's every show, and from every brand, whatever down, was all sneakers, and it's now the norm.
Suits as well. It's like this kind of
like that guy there.
Yeah, that has been it's a big look. I mean, that was the thing that struck me most about the McQueen show in London. Suddenly there was all these sneakers, and they'd gone from that gothic-y stuff that they were doing, and then suddenly there was a big sneaker thing, and also the sneakers. It's a kind of funny one because like there's quite a lot of busy sneakers, but also felt to me like a lot of the sneakers this season were a bit more pared back actually. Sort of more simple pumps, bit of a Stan Smith type vibe.
Yeah. I mean, these are obviously like crocodile and stuff. Like they're not just sneakers, but they're.
But even on the catwalk, they felt quite simple.
Yeah, very simple.
And I guess if you want a kind of techie, ornate sneaker, you can go and get it from a sports shop. If you're going to buy a Louis Vuitton, you just want like a white crocodile sneaker. That's almost more luxurious.
It almost felt a bit like shoes were going away of ties.
Yeah, exactly. They become super irrelevant. I love the trouser shape, and so many shows throughout the whole season were verging on a flare. It was interesting talking with Gordon yesterday, because I'd forgotten at Top Man they actually did do flares, but like so many shows were like, oh, is that a flare? And you have to really look to see where the line of the trouser was. And these were like, oh, a little bit more, maybe a flare. And
it was a good Fashion Week game, actually.
Yeah, spot a flare.
Boot cut.
Yeah.
Are we ready for men in flares? I know you work a flare very well.
Obsessed. And also, like, if you see, like at the end of Boyhood, and Boyhood's the most amazing film ever, but like seen it yet, the really treat good. At the end is the best pair of flares ever. So it's I don't mean more than ready for flares.
Do you think we're ready for flares? And then you looked a bit nervous there.
Yeah, why not? I think they can come back.
I'm scared.
I don't. Yeah, maybe not the full-on flare, but this kind of where it's, you know, teetering on the edge, like Charlie said.
Yeah.
I'm definitely really over the skinny look. Anything to get away from that.
Would you wear flares?
I mean, I think I did at college. I quite liked them. I thought what was quite funny was I was watching that film Her with Joaquin Phoenix a few weeks ago, and he's wearing a high-waisted trouser in that film that just reminded me of that.
And actually a friend said that to me about these trousers, because actually those trousers were specially made by Opening Ceremony, weren't they? For the film, they developed a particular trouser. So a friend said they're the Her trousers, aren't they? Well, I haven't seen Her.
But it's interesting, you know, everyone's talking a lot about normcore and this kind of idea of ordinariness, but I think we talked about this, I think, when we were in Paris, this that Her aesthetic, I think, is that kind of almost like not cartoony silhouettes, but like, you know, if you draw a human, I feel like that's like what a lot of the clothes look like.
Almost like a little body, because you don't really like you do all the legs really strangely long.
It's like draw a boy. I feel like that's what you got at a lot of the shows, and there was that kind of cleanness. It was quite interesting. Talking about a show that didn't have luxury sneakers in it, let's talk about Com, because they were some of my favourite shoes of the season. It was absolutely amazing.
The show was like the best show. It was so extraordinary. It was such it's interesting because with Com you quite often leave not really clear what the message is, and she doesn't want there to be a message. Like it's quite often a confusion, and that's what makes it glorious. But with the first look, it's like it's anti-war. Like you knew it straight away. And the amazing thing was how she did it with such clarity, force, sincerity, a meaning. And it wasn't just anti-war, it was about the futility of war. And so the first look, which is, whichever way we go to the first look, was a guy in those pointy shoes. That's towards the end, you go the other way.
Down. Thanks, Andrew. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, so they started with like, they came out in, that's the very first look. A guy with like ridiculous winkle pickers like that, with a military jacket on, but the military jacket has been corrupted by fabric, and so straight away, boom! It's futility of military clothing, futility of messages of war. It was so clear, and it then went on to, for me, it was about the futility of clothing itself. Like she then went and actually made cuts into clothing so that the clothes looked like tarpaulin webbing, whatever you call it. That was one of these cases where I was sat at the shows trying to write, thinking, what is the word for that stuff where they have like netting in the army or whatever. But she was actually saying that like clothes themselves were irrelevant. like the futility of the
I
message
don't
of
think it was
clothing.
clothes. I think
No,
it was
that's
masculine clothes.
No, I think it was about it's a menswear show, so it's masculine
Yeah,
clothes.
but I mean, like,
it was
there's
about
really like codes of masculinity.
Yeah, but it's about like these things that we see a military jacket, therefore we think
exactly,
we take
yeah.
that man as power and stature, and instead it's like no, these things really mean nothing. We're just humans.
Yeah, no, I think I agree, and it's interesting with those shoes. It's almost like, you know, when men wear like shoes and they wear like polished, pointy shoes.
Yeah.
Is that masculinity code, and then she just made them look ridiculous.
Yeah,
Everything was kind of exaggerated, so it felt.
It was like, I mean, I hate Gulliver's Travels, but it felt like that sort of Swiftian kind of like totally like.
Why do you hate Gulliver's Travels?
Oh God, I did it in third year and I hate it so much.
Okay.
But it is that complete thing of like completely ridiculing.
Yeah.
Which was so powerful.
Which is quite interesting, because if you think very masculine clothes, things like military, things like uniform, they are always on the brink of just looking ridiculous, and it doesn't take a lot to push them over. So I think that was quite interesting. And
then towards the end, it then suddenly went really kind of like powerful again, but also then commercial, because there were clothes with kind of handwritten statements on, like "Soldier of Peace" or something like that, and one said something like. I do not know why we're here, or I don't know where we are, or something, which Adrian Joffrey from Com said comes from a First World War poet. I've been trying to work out which one it is, but like there was that real link to 100 years ago and the First World War in it. It was just the most extraordinary collection.
it was quite a moving show. Did you guys see the show?
No.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Yeah. You always feel like quite privileged, don't you, when you're in a com show? And it was tiny as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. And there was something interesting about where it was, because it was that kind of abandoned mall, so you got this, even that was a bit futile, you know, there was something interesting about it.
Yeah, and you went up by an escalator, and Adrian was like, it's taken months to get him to agree to turn the escalator on, and we just realised there's no way down.
That was true,
amazing.
it finished, and then everyone thought they'd flip the elevator,
like,
and then they didn't, and then you had to...
But again, it's that privilege of being at shows, so it's, I thought that was an honour to be there. Can we talk about Junior?
Yeah, of course.
Because that was a for me, obviously they're always kind of linked, because they're always on the same day, and Junior's in the morning and Com's in the afternoon, and Junior was an extraordinary show too, but for different reasons, in that it was a celebration of tradition and Japanese tradition, and the colour blue and indigo dye, and Junior's really, there was that period where Junior was hunting and fishing for so long, and because he kind of was the first to do hunting and fishing, it was okay for him to do it, but some shows you were like, oh please, can we move on from the hunting and fishing, and for the last 2 seasons he's gone somewhere else, and obviously it's still the stuff that the junior man wants, so it's like kind of utility, or like a hybrid of a tailored jacket with utility pockets or something like that, but he's now moved it on, so here it was all Japanese cloths or Japanese dyeing techniques or Japanese stitching, and it was really moving as well.
And it's interesting as well, you mentioned, you know, just with looking at the codes of Japanese design, because I feel like, and this is something we've talked about as well, Sam, you can see that influence of Japanese fashion so readily across women's wear and men's wear across the world, especially in London. So I think there's something even more intriguing when you see the sort of masters do it themselves.
Yeah.
Did you like the show, Simon?
Yeah, I just thought it looked fascinating, and was some hand technique, some Japanese hand technique, I think, wasn't there, to do with the patchwork or something? Yeah,
it was the whiter stitch you can just see on that one on the left. The jacket itself was made traditionally, like in a factory, but actually then there was stitching done to it as well.
Why do you think Japanese style or aesthetics are having a bit of a moment?
I'm not sure, actually, is the honest answer. I mean, obviously that's a market that's growing, but I think it's just something that sometimes just happens that's in the water, that people feel inspired by that, and that it kind of gets a momentum. I mean, it's kind of also interesting about this show that, you know, he's been doing that sort of denim thing for a while, and suddenly denim is like the headline story for next season. So I thought that was really interesting. That I remember those, was it in women's wear or men's wear that he did like that sort of patchwork?
It was women's first.
And it just kind of seemed to almost feels like that you could trace back this denim revival to that to some extent. I thought that was when jeans felt exciting again.
There's so much you can trace back to their shows if you actually look at what people are doing, and I think the thing with I mean, you say the Japanese market, I mean, I actually know, because there's Undercover as well, which hopefully we'll talk about, but I think there's a discipline and a separation with them, so their work is done in a very disciplined way, and really they push themselves so hard, and the studio at Com is completely, no one can go there, and it's complete isolation, and they work so hard and they really, really push, and then they come to Paris and reveal this work, and there's something in that method which makes it always. I don't know. It's always good.
Yeah, it always kind of stands apart, doesn't it?
It's
like
everything else.
Why does it stand apart? That's interesting you say that, Helen. Is it just because of that craft? Is it because they're more secret? What is it about it?
I think it must be all of like a combination of all of that. It is like such a kind of craftsmanship to it. It's not, it's not like it doesn't feel like a mass-produced like brand. It feels, like there's thought and care in everything. And
I also think it's also the fact that they're willing to actually question the nature of fashion itself, and it's the same with Raf and with Mrs. Prada in Milan, is that quite often they'll say things which are completely contradictory to the work they do, in a sense of actually questioning even the production of clothing or why they make clothes, and it's that bravery to use fashion with another message rather than, okay, this season it's blah.
Yeah, it's not like trying to sell a jacket. It's exploring it, and there's like always like lots of deconstruction, and it's exactly like with Prada when she's like, oh, I wanted it to look ugly. I wanted to make a denim, but it's not denim. Or it's a fur, and it's not going to be fur, but it's going to look like that.
If you read any interview with her and anyone says like, oh, what does he like about fashion, she'll immediately say like how much she hates it or something. There's that contradiction to it. But then also the thing with them is they are also proper old-fashioned cloth trade. Like they love making clothes and selling clothes, so it's not like we're questioning it and we're cutting ourselves off. It's actually they love. I mean, the Dover Street markets are the kind of archetype shop in the world, aren't they? Like they love selling things. They love.
Well, it's particularly intriguing talking about that kind of, how we don't see them as being about selling and something so sort of magical and creative about it. When you think Com as a brand is so incredibly commercial when you think about it, and I find that endlessly fascinating. How you do something that commercial but keep that level of acclaim. I think there's so few people that.
And it's quite often a thing. Before I'm talking with young designers in London, I say go and look at Com, like look at all the different brands and look at how they. If Com is difficult, they make sure that Com play is commercial. They make it so that the brand always works.
And let's talk, while we're talking about Com and the Com family, let's talk about Gosha Rubinski, because it was really interesting, because he's been really championed, obviously taken and supported by Com, and it's really intriguing firstly to see a Russian designer kind of, because I think there's so much interesting stuff going on in Russia with Russian fashion, but this was his first show in Paris. I actually didn't make the show because I didn't get there in time. Eurostar,
but it's allowed because it was it was literally like 11 a.m. on the first day when no one is normally there.
You couldn't get there, could you?
People get a buy for not going to. I'm not going to. But it was the thing. Gosha, if you look on YouTube and it's spelt wrong, so it's not even under his name. You have to put a funny lettering in. You can see his videos of his shows from Moscow from about 4 or 5 years ago that were these not big productions because the budgets were small, but they had like big ambition. And there's a show where it was in a sports hall and the boys came in and then walked around once, and there were these kind of stairs, stacked up things, and they ran and sat on them and made a kind of tableau. And so when he was talking about showing in Paris, I presumed it was going to be like all singing and dancing, but actually it was super simple, 2 benches down the other side and these red lights at the back. And it was great that the focus was on the clothes, like you really made you concentrate on what he was doing. This is another collection where it's a shame you can't see the back, because on pieces like that denim jacket, there's like on the back there's like these 9 squares of different weird cheap cloth, and it's almost like some sort of weird semaphore. Like there's a camo and there's like a fake fur and like a thingy, and it's some sort of weird message. Like it's so strange what something simple like that can do. And
it's hard to speculate, but why do you think that Com have been intrigued by what he does? Why do you think they've taken him on board?
It's such an easy story. Basically, what it is that to do anything in Russia is impossible because of export prices and the factories, and it's unpredictable, the fashion business there.
Yeah.
So Gosha tried to launch his own business there and his own label, and Dover Street Market picked him up, and they did like one collection with him where he did his best of pieces. And basically, at the end of that season, Gosha was like, I can't make any money from this because it costs so much money to produce. So he actually gave up fashion for a year and did a photo project and a book. And then Adrian got in touch with Adrian Joffe from Com and was like, okay, we will produce your clothes for you in Europe, so it doesn't have to get made. So Gosha works completely independently in Moscow, and then Com produce it in Portugal, I think. and they sell it from Paris, so it acts like a European label, and it's reliable, all sort of stuff. And they've got a gentleman's agreement. There's no contract or anything. They just pay each other the right amount of money. So he's part of the family but separate, and it's the loveliest deal. It's such a great way for fashion to work, and I wish it would happen more often.
Is there a slight concern with that though, that if it's great for Gosha, but then what about other designers in Russia who need to kind of?
Well, Gosha's very clear about this as well. I interviewed him, a fantastic
Yeah,
man. It sounds like I'm his PR or something, thing. But no, I spent a couple of days with him in St. Petersburg in February, so it's kind of all in my head. But like he's very clear that this is what he does and that he wants to do it, and he wants to show what Russia can do. The reality is that you can't. I mean, there is Russian Fashion Week, St. Petersburg Fashion Week, and what, but they're one of those weird weeks that are out of the season, so there's no point showing there because no one's doing any buying.
But I mean, it's so important that you get a system where people can produce clothes in Russia and it isn't so
Sure, but that's to do with the Russian government and Russian, that's one young designer can't solve that at all. What I mean, the thing with Gosha is that he's so pro-Russia, like he's totally pro-Russia. He it's really interesting to talk to him with everything that's going on there, because he kind of totally believes that in 20, 30 years' time there'll be his generation in charge and it'll be a different country, and it shouldn't be damned in such a sort of like kind of black and white way. And actually someone went up to him afterwards and asked him a question and said like, was there a message in the thing, and he literally just went, "Hello from Russia," and then like ran backstage and it's like, that's all he needs to say. I feel like I've given my Gosha lecture now, sorry.
Do you like the collection from what you've seen? Because you went at the show,
yeah.
weren't you?
No, I wasn't. Like, I do really like what. I wish I could see the back though.
Yeah.
You just said that about the jacket.
That's a shame, but yeah.
Do you find it, with something like The Observer or The Guardian, if you put something like Gosha in there, do you find that people are intrigued by it, or is it a case where people still think of fashion as being very European?
No, I think people are always happy to see new things and learn new names and find out about stuff. I don't think they, have, it must just be that.
That's interesting. Because I think that's one of the big things with Gosha is like, I always think like people can't pronounce his name, it's scary, and you read it and you're like, what is that? And you forget it, there's something quite
But he's also the thing with him is his price points are really low, and it's very similar to what we were saying about London. Like, he's one of those designers who's realising that fashion doesn't need to be a thing which is in the thousands of pounds. Fashion is a thing that can be created quite simply and easily, and it's about colour choices or fabrics
similar
or silhouettes.
vibe to Craig in some respects.
Green. And he loves like awful like fake fur and like fleecy stuff, and like there's a kind of like lovely naive optimism about it, and but also he has got that kind of cult following as well. So people might not know how to pronounce his name, but he knows how to tap into something.
What have we not talked about that we should talk about that was also really good? Were there any surprises?
Well, so this was on Wednesday.
Yeah.
I think Wednesday's becoming a really good day. I love Christophe Lemaire, and when I went to the showroom to look at it, I was literally like, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. I love that whole thing that he's doing. That's kind of, it's really minimal, but it's kind of, there's just something that really, it's just incredibly wearable, and like the shapes are really nice. I don't know, it just sort of feels like a really good example of that whole idea at the moment where lots of brands are sort of creating wardrobes for men, and I think he does that really well. And they sort of, you can be the Christophe Lemaire man, as in you can wear that whole thing head to toe, but it also slots in really nicely into other bits of your wardrobe. And I love that, and I also loved Hyder on Wednesday as well. I just thought it was amazing. I loved it.
It's interesting because there's a very unique point of view, and I know there's a bit of umming and ahhing this season where some people was like, oh, it's repetitive, he needs to push himself a bit, which I do see that. But then it's interesting to have someone who just has such a unique vision of how men should be and how men should dress, and presents that option.
The thing is, if you're a Hyder customer, then this is only your fourth chance to buy Hyder Ackerman. Yeah. And in menswear. Yeah. And the thing is, so I didn't see the first collection, but I've seen the 3 in Paris, because the first was in Pitti or something.
Yeah. It was ages ago as well. Yeah. It
and so basically, what he's done is that the first collection was all these incredible jewel like colours in tailoring. Then the second collection was matte, kind of winter, kind of like herringbones and stuff, the autumn winter stuff which is going to stores now. And then this was another thing which is like kind of softer, more fluid, different cloths. So he doesn't need to push himself, he's revealing what he can do. It's like he's kind of showing his cards season by season. Like, and I thought the velvet pieces, that one you just saw just then, were so gorgeous. And this isn't like Hyder again. It's another stand-up show, and it's always in a lovely old abandoned house or
It was
whatever.
lovely,
and
wasn't it?
Yeah.
So gorgeous.
The models were coming out into this like old dilapidated kind of room, and then they would come outside into a garden. And I also love the way at the end of the shows they all just mill around.
Yeah.
And they go to the bar.
Yeah, and
go
have
get
a glass
a drink.
of wine, and like you can sort of take pictures, and you can talk to them and touch the clothes, and I just love that as
It's a very nice way of presenting fashion, isn't it?
And the difference is we've just come from Milan, where we've had this idea of fashion, and it's quite often like 18-year-old boys wearing like a brand for like 50-year-olds, and you're meant to try and work out what that means, and it feels so separated. Whereas here, there are like all sorts of different models wandering around this Paris world, and you feel like you are in the brand, and you feel like you're looking at the customers wearing the clothes, and that immediate thing happens when you get to Paris, where you actually feel authenticity in a brand, and I think it's extraordinarily clever. And also layering as well, like he's a real kind of master at like layering. I actually prefer his men's to his women's, because in women's it's quite often stuff that's cut away, and I find that more difficult. I actually like the men's where it's more kind of friendly.
And what does this say about the way that men want to dress and men are dressing?
I think what this says is that there's always been a man who wants to dress like this, because it's not for young men. This, I mean, I think there are young men who, if they've got the money, they could afford it, but the reality of this customer is someone who's made money, and he's always wanted to dress like this, and maybe he's been through Lanvin before in the past, or maybe he's a Dries customer, but there is a man who wants clothes that aren't the obvious, who wants cloth and wants the kind of beauty of cloth.
I also think he's sort of building up things. I mean, you know, obviously, as Charlie said, it's quite young for his menswear. Like, he hasn't been doing it very long. And when you go into the showroom and you see it and you touch it, and they run you through each different section, so it's sort of often split into like the trousers, the jacket, and they are just very cleverly developing those signature things each season and working out what their customer wants. And I think that, you know, when I was in the showroom, I just felt that all the tactile factor, it's incredible. Like, the craftsmanship is really nice, but also the shapes are really interesting. And you know, there's a slim trouser if you're the slim person, but if you're a wide, I don't know, I think it's really clever, like how, aside from owning that particular kind of look, it's also offering that look in a kind of nice broad way. Like, it's not, this is one trouser, this is one, like it's very considered in that way. And also, I thought what was interesting for me about this was that it felt a little bit like there's a loosening up of menswear in general next season. It sort of seemed to fit that kind of like dressing gown kind of off the shoulder, and the crumpled feel that like Bottega had, you know, like for me that feels like a bit of a sea change, and goes back to what you said about skinny trousers, like this sort of loose, I don't know, so it's kind of clever because it was very Hyder, but also actually for me felt like it was part of the next phase of where the trend thing is moving. We went, and also on Wednesday we came to the show from Valentino, which was also a really good Valentino show. If you've got Valentino on the thingy, which that's probably not the nicest one to start. That's really boring, but like
the pajama print.
It's weird how sometimes like, oh, that really good show. No, but like Valentino, I thought it was the most successful Valentino show because of
it's another one where you wish you could see the backs though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it was the floral print that was that weird thing where it was like really intense but also austere, because the flowers were all quite closed, or they weren't. It wasn't like
it was more like a kind of stylized deco.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of print rather than like the florals that we've just seen from summer, like all the kind of blooms.
I think this is towards the end. No, this is it. I think this is the end bit, isn't it? Or is it? I don't know.
I'm not sure which way it's going, because they were nearer the beginning, weren't they? The
I can't remember. But it was
also those trousers, those sort of pajama-y things, and the florals were more towards the start.
Yeah,
the other way.
Keep going.
But
here we go.
Yeah, and also it was this run of like loads and loads of looks where they came in different size print, different garments, prints matched together, and it was one of those lovely periods in the show where your kind of mind just forgets every other thing you're thinking about and just look at the print and enjoy the kind of abundance of it. I thought it was a great show. And
what do you think about this thing? So it was interesting because we were talking about it was then this idea of like couture for men, because that seems to be something that, and Valentino always talk about that. What does that mean?
I mean, with Valentino it means nothing because they don't do it. Like, I mean, the thing with
Yeah.
the thing with Xenia is that like they're attempting to, and it's so expensive that it's like, you know, that thing. I mean, the interesting thing with Valentino is how they steer a path into fashion, and it's the thing I've been interested in since the beginning. Of like, because the first collection was so good, then the second collection was like, oh, I'm not so sure about this, and it was like, are they trying to make it be like short-term trend, or are they trying to make an idea of a brand? And it didn't matter which one they wanted to do as long as they did whichever it was well. And I felt like it's really settled down into a thing where you could define a man as someone who buys Valentino clothes, not just to study trainary things, which I think has made the idea of Valentino a bit weird and over there, because their trainers are so successful, but they're a bit kind of quietly vulgar, aren't they? They're kind of studied and things. But whereas this world here is so lovely.
This is a bit more opulent, and a bit, but in a kind of, as you say, it's a bit more refined opulence rather than kind of studded neon opulence.
That was great.
Let's talk about Dries as well, because I feel like I'm intrigued by both what Helen and Simon talked about, this idea of loosening up and relaxing, and this kind of slightly more easy sort of, and it's interesting how much, we talked about this yesterday actually for Milan, how much ballet we saw.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a big dance influence. Run like through Milan and into Paris, and it has this whole kind of undress, like slightly more sensual. It's not a very big kind of suited, buttoned up season, like we said with the footwear.
I don't think fashion menswear is going to be again. I'd be fascinated if it ever did go back to that.
But it feels more kind of more undressed than I've ever seen it before.
This idea of clothes hanging off, you know, it's athletic, but even athletic can feel quite stiff and
it's not like
whereas
the
this is
sporty athlete thing. It's just much more relaxed.
It's more sensual.
It's sexy, I thought.
Yeah, it's really
sexy.
sexy.
We talked about this on London, that men dress sexy now, which is quite interesting.
But it's like not a kind of gratuitous sexy. It's like a sort of rumpled and crumpled sort of just rolled out of bed sexy, which I don't know. Like obviously the dancer thing really conjures up that idea as well.
But does it just come back to this idea of ease, that people don't want to look like stiff and?
But the thing is, if you talk about Dries, it's not easy at all, because this was quite an aggressive show.
Maybe
not aggressive, but it was very, very fast and punchy.
And that clock.
It was really. It was actually
note.
like very. It was a really hard Dries show. I think Dries is fascinating in the way he goes between like a soft show and one that's quite sort of granddaddy and young men dressed as older men, and then every so often, boom, it's like really sexy. And this was such a sexy show, and it's so weird to see a Dries sexy show that, but he does it really convincingly. It's not like awkward or anything, and like when he does it, it really works. And
but I think it's interesting that silhouettes like that, you know, the one we were seeing there, that you know, quite draped, this idea they're quite flowing, can be presented as aggressively sexy. That's what I found really interesting, is that it was, you're right, it was an aggressive show, and the speed of it and the pace of it and the soundtrack of it, but then the clothes weren't masculine or macho,
fluidity
they were
within
fluid,
them.
And I think that's really interesting, that can be as aggressively sexual as like a big padded shoulder suit. It's kind of like quite subversive. I think that idea.
I mean, I think the one big thing that's come from fashion this year is the not even the recontextualising of Dries, but that exhibition was so powerful in Paris, and it really showed how he can put so many things in one collection. So the straps were like super hard. And these kind of like bits that were kind of embroidered down the shoulder felt quite like harnesses. They look softer there, but in the show they were some were
like
actually
a kind
attached.
of gun holster in a way,
exactly.
don't they?
They were really like attached on. So, but then also there were these super soft coats that flowed behind the model as they walked. So he's very good at making a tension between things that in other designers' hands would just be like, oh, it's a mess. Like he can wind it up when he wants to wind it up.
And it was a real celebration of clothes and movement as well, because actually it's interesting, because with the show it is quite interesting to look at the pictures, because the guys are walking so fast that you do even get a sense of the movement of the cloth when you see it still, which is interesting. It was a really smart presentation.
I was obsessed with the shoes, so I'm obsessed with Dries shoes, and like I love a slipper. I love a slip-on, and so to know that can happen for me next year is like
you're very happy.
Very exciting indeed.
You're a Dries man. Did you?
Oh, I love Dries.
Yeah. Was this a favourite for you?
Yeah. I mean, I actually missed the show, unfortunately.
You look really heartbroken
I
when you said
I
that.
was, and it was awful because when I met everyone afterwards and they were showing me videos, I was literally like, how did I miss this one? Because I'm a big fan. But I think it's really also, to go back to what Charlie was saying about the slippers, like actually quite interesting that if there is one shoe trend that isn't a trainer or a sandal next season, it's sort of a ballet shoe. It's kind of like,
dance pump.
it's quite funny that could, not funny, but like, you know, you wouldn't have said from a kind of chunky brogue a couple of years ago that we would then be looking at that. I don't know, I think that's quite interesting. I also think there's something about the whole dancer ballet thing that's kind of a development from everyone talking about artists.
Yeah.
Like as a cultural reference point, you know, that designers obviously, they I don't know why, but they all seem to somehow unite at different points about what they're interested in.
I wonder if they all have the same dreams and like wake up in the morning and the thought.
It's kind of might be that. I don't know, like, but it definitely feels like that everyone's been talking about artists and the influence of artists, and I sort of think the dance thing is somehow a really nice development from that somehow.
It's weird because I'm so blind to that sort of thing. I've got such a blind spot to, like, it was only when someone said that show was about dancers, I was like, oh, okay, was it? Like, I had no idea. And also Bottega, it's like, that's not about dancing, that's like, really, that's about wearing shorts, how men wear shorts today. Like, yes, there's that influence in it, and there's that kind of background stuff, but like, this is about great soft clothes. Do you know what I mean?
It's taste to that though, isn't there? You know, the same thing with just men wearing shorts. I think it's not about dance as in like looking at a picture of a ballerina, but you know, that idea of a dancer being out of training, going somewhere. And I find that, I think that's what people are, and I think that's kind of what Bottega was about, and that's what this was about to me, you know, like throwing something on and going somewhere. It's like that, I think is interesting.
And it's that kind of the physicality of it as well. I think that's like the dance aspect rather than just being like a ballerina performing. It's not really that.
I don't think
it's
it was about
the
performance, was it?
The dancer as a person.
But also that connection between the fluidity of dance and the fluidity of the clothes.
And obviously I'm being a bit flip, like I'm being a bit sort of, but the thing is that it is interesting that the ones that were having dance as a theme were all quite individual in themselves. So it wasn't like it was, oh god, here we go for another show that's based on whatever. But because Bottega and this one, and what was the other one?
There was another one, wasn't there?
Rick Owen? No.
Oh yeah, Rick was Rick was the ballet Russe, but Rick's was super. Yeah, can we look at Rick?
Yeah,
Rick was amazing.
Rick's was so good, and it was like, because his was about the fawn, I think.
Yeah, the fawn. Which
the
is
masturbating fawn.
The masturbating fawn.
Oh really? I don't know.
I love that you said masturbating when I liked it. High five.
What it was about.
It was about that. Because he masturbates over a scarf, and that's why there was a lot of that kind of long...
The trailing.
Did you not read it?
I didn't read the release, no.
That's what the fawn is about. Yeah, the fawn story. It's like these nymphs, and they're like lost in the forest, and the fawn comes, and then I think one of them goes, and then they leave their scarf, and then it's a very Rick story. But that's what that big bit of... I think for him actually it was quite a literal, he liked that story and found it quite interesting.
Okay. All right.
You look really excited.
It's really jolly. No, I love hearing Rick stories because they're always so like completely, and he just says like, it's about this. I missed that one.
You can't really see the trailing, but again it's like another one of those back view.
Well, we'll see it when the
works
short
in motion.
Caught round, don't you? That kind of draping on that suggests that. Why did because everyone seemed to think this was a really great show. What was it about it that was so striking?
It just had a really good energy.
Yeah.
I don't even really know beyond that. It just seemed quite fascinating, like, and you just wanted to unpick the clothes. I really wanted to sort of touch them and break them down and poke them, and you know, I think sometimes that's what you want from a fashion show. You want to feel intrigued to then go and feel them, touch them, try them on, or you know. It just felt really alive and fast and sort of, I don't know, what's the word I was thinking of? It just kind of quite like urgent or something.
Yeah. It's interesting that like Rick sometimes is kind of solemn and like monks and monastery or whatever, and this was haywire. It was like all over the place. So sometimes there'd be a top with just a bit of nylon here, and it was like these harnesses all over here, and like it got a frenetic energy about it.
I thought it felt like
really
if aliens came and tried to put on human clothes.
Yeah.
Just didn't understand how they worked. I really thought I was sitting
especially
there.
Especially like the
ones. It was like they were like, "What's this?" And
yeah.
And also because they were painted like purple as well.
Yeah. And I love a Rick romper, and they got these most amazing denim rompers at the beginning. It's like, okay, I want a denim romper.
But it's interesting we're seeing so many like nylon bombers. We just talked about denim before, you know, jeans being such a big thing, and then he'd just taken denim and like put it there, or like put some nylon in.
Yeah.
You know, it's very Rick, wasn't it?
I think the thing also with Rick as well, and this is the absolute pleasure of Paris, is that you're seeing work by actual individuals who we were talking yesterday about how Craig Green, in 20 years' time, he'll still be making it, and Rick works on his own. He doesn't have a design team. He does everything. Like it's so, it's seeing someone's work, which is the kind of the pleasure of it.
And also that it's independent, you know, it's Rick and it's him,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
owned by, there's an interesting thing to that, isn't there?
Yeah, that's the romper. I think one in the middle, and also I like that long top with the thing there. But that's
That was a
personal
good
shopping
one.
rather than thingy.
And I find Rick endlessly fascinated with the way that he can kind of have such a clear world, such a clear universe, and he is a really like tribal designer in that sense. You know, there are people that wear head to toe Rick and they are completely obsessed with him, but also that he can reinvent himself. You know, if we'd have been sat here a year ago, we would have talking him as the great showman, and you know how effortlessly he was like done with that, moves on, and that's something really interesting.
But like 10 years ago, you'd have been talking about the leather jacket, and then all things happened, and he had to move somewhere else. He had to because otherwise it would have been, you know, that was really good that happened. That his jacket became the most copied thing in not on a high street, because then it forced him to find some other new idea. And you can still go buy that leather jacket, but there's also this whole other world as well. When are we going to bite the Saint Laurent bullet?
Now.
Okay.
Simon, what did you think of Saint Laurent?
Well,
Heavy.
I really liked Autumn Winter that's still about to come into the stores now. It was my favourite one so far, and I think the reason I like the one now is because it's got the Eddie rock and roll thing, but it felt like there were lots of things in it that were a little bit more grown up somehow. And I like that kind of combination of his rock and roll thing with the sort of left bank Saint Laurent thing. And when he does that, there are just lots of clothes that I want to buy from it. This one I enjoyed it because I think it was such a kind of you know, it whacks you round the head. It's just this kind of onslaught of boys in rock and roll clothes. But I don't know. It didn't quite do it for me in the same way that the one before did. But there were things within it that I thought were really clever. Like I loved the denim jacket with the sort of sparkles and studs on it, and also I think what's really interesting about Saint Laurent is it doesn't really matter whether or not it critically divides people. It sells like hotcakes.
Yeah,
I mean, it's literally one of the most successful brands. I mean, his rebranding of this house is incredibly successful, and everything around it is so brilliantly considered. I mean, I absolutely love the ad campaigns. I love all that stuff around that. I love the fact that there is the connection with the bands, because it makes it feel like there's an element of that whole classic fashion music fusion. I think all those things are really clever. And also, you know what I always find when the buyers really like this show and they've bought lots of full head to toe looks, and I always find actually I'm more excited about it once I actually get to see it with what they've bought, because then it all starts to sort of make more sense to me as well.
What's your take on it, Helen?
I liked a lot of it from a styling point of view, because it felt like a bit dressing up boxy, like at the very what's the end, but the beginning of the pictures we saw those like that embellished kind of colourful coat, jacket. There's loads of things like from a shoot point of view, I was just like, oh yeah, amazing, like, I'll shoot that, I'll shoot that, I'll shoot that. And then I was thinking about it in context of the whole season and as a fashion thing, and then I feel differently about it from that point of view. But I have to say I enjoyed that show, and there were a lot of things that I thought, yeah, I'm going to use that, people are going to buy that, that's going to be successful. It always makes me really question it. I change my mind about it so often, but when I see the product, I really love it.
It's interesting that you say product, because you wrote about that in your piece about it, didn't you? Because I think that's quite a good way of describing it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's totally stuff that sells, and it's the removal of the old fashioned system that used to need to be in place to send a message out about what clothes are.
I liked also what you said in your piece about the fact that you believe that these boys wear these clothes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love that whole, they're all sat cross-legged
on the floor. Front row.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah, it's believable. But it's that thing of it's been a very difficult journey in terms of the press for Saint Laurent, but it's been the most insane journey in terms of the brand. And do we think they care at all about the thing with the press? No, but
I think
it's
still.
That's
what I find so frustrating, because why are they trying to censor everyone so much? Why do they send so many aggressive emails? Why does Eddie write open letters to Cathy Horan? I would love it so much more if they were like, fuck it, we don't give a shit what you think, like we know it's really selling, but they obviously do.
I feel like that's calmed down. I feel like
it's calmed down. Yeah, I mean, I thought that you know, I we had that image in the Financial Times on the weekend, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, I love that blanket!" Like, blankets again, but like, but that was there were 4 other images, and that was when I was like, "Oh my god, I love that!" Like it reacts with people rather than with an editor who then has to say it to their editor for a shoot.
Has to say that this was good because
like it works, and I also love that we end because it's the last show of the season, so it always feels like this kind of like end of term thing. But also, I love a show that confronts you at the end of the season, like in the kind of the way that Mimi does with Women's Wear. It's different because that's a more kind of friendly hand, whereas this is like a okay, whatever.
Knocks you back to London.
Yeah, now I'm gonna make you think about this. It went on forever. It was so long, but so completely captivating. Because you had no idea what you knew what was happening because these clothes, but so many was such great things. I wrote in Milan about Gucci because that was a difficult show for me, and I wrote in it about there was one thing that had kind of military detailing and stuff, and I wrote about like if you're going to do a military jacket, it needs to be done with some like conviction and some force. And as I wrote it, I thought, I bet they do military jackets at Sun and Ron. I bet I have to think about what I wrote at Gucci, and it's really made me think about what I wrote because also it's my big kind of contradiction of the season was that I wrote a whole piece about how Milan was not literal. It was all about pieces that you buy, and fashion's no longer about. I literally said designers no longer dictate a decade. And then, okay, all right, here we go with this. And it's really weird that I like a house that actually is doing a thing that I said I didn't find interesting, or that doesn't happen anymore. But then that's why it's fascinating to think about.
But is there not something, what I get stuck on, and I'm intrigued to know what you're thinking about this, is I just don't think there's anything impressive about taking a garment that you could buy in a thrift store if you can be bothered to make the effort, literally copying it, and then making it more expensive.
So I was at lunch after yesterday, and there was someone at the next table who works for a brand, and they were in town to go shopping at vintage stores. It's what every brand does. They go around vintage stores, they buy stuff, and they copy it.
Yeah, but it's not their whole collection.
Well, we don't know because we don't know what they're buying. You know, there's so many things that are total copies. It's and I think the thing with him is he's actually making the stuff that you want to find, that actual little military jacket or that little leather jacket, and he's making you the exact version which you would have to go to some flea market in Santa Monica at 6 a.m. on the 1st August of the month. You know, the thing you never do. Like I never go to vintage stores, but I love things that have that feeling about them. And I've been wearing an old prisoner's jacket I got from Portobello like years and years ago again, because it feels so right to wear something kind of.
But does that not feel more special because you got it from Portobello and there's a story?
Yeah, but then also if I find the version of it like here, then I'd buy it because I want that jacket.
I loved that really embellished.
Yeah.
One more velvet one.
I think the other thing about it as well is that actually it has a real. I mean, it taps in, I think, to that idea about men's fashion having a link with music, and that's obviously always been historically a big thing about men's fashion and the music thing. But also what's kind of brilliant about Saint Laurent is that it's a lot of the clothes are actually completely ageless. Like you could be 50 and still buy the stuff. And I think the thing is that obviously the presentation of it on these skinny boys, a lot of whom are in bands, can potentially be alienating. But on the other hand, that is kind of what makes it kind of exciting, because it is convincing that you believe that they will wear these boys wear these clothes. So I don't know, I think it has a much broader appeal in that sense than just the show. And I think if you look at the campaigns as well, there's a kind of like, there's more of that left bank thing and less like, I mean, not always, because some of the campaigns are quite rock and roll too, but I don't know, I think it's a really clever combination.
And also the thing that the thing that always from Dior was the fact that he knows how to cut clothes. It's not just getting a vintage thing and showing it out. He actually knows how to sharpen it, tighten it, make that line perfect, make that line exact. And I think he doesn't need to show it off so much here, whereas in Dior it was much more overt, that there was that line and there was that thing, and he was a younger man, and here it's like, well, it's just making great clothes. It doesn't need to. He doesn't need to let us know that code. You know it when you put it on and then go to the till and pay for it, because you've just put on the thing that makes you feel like that.
It's really beautifully made.
Yeah.
Like the quality of it. I mean, I've got a shirt from there, and the shape of it is really nice. It feels really flattering.
But I do feel it's fashion. It's not luxury. Like I don't think
Yeah.
it's luxury.
No,
Like it's fashion. And I find that really exciting as well, that they're pushing fashion. When people may not like it, but yeah.
It always jumps out to me online on matches, if I'm scrolling through looking for something for a shoot, without fail, I always stop. Oh, that shirt's great. Oh, it's Saint Laurent.
Yeah.
Keep going. That's great. That jumper is Saint Laurent.
Saint Laurent.
Always.
Yeah.
Which in the beginning I didn't think I would ever say that. I thought, oh, you can get that anywhere. Like you said, it's like thrift shop. Some of our like high street stores at that time were doing like a similar look, so people were like, oh, you can get that there. But as Simon just said, when you actually are physically touching that, it's a world apart. It isn't like what's inside.
And do you find on shoots that the models always love it? I mean, I always like the jeans are quite
The jeans
difficult,
no one
the
can get on.
samples of the jeans are really quite small, but like when models put it on, they sort of seem quite excited by it.
They like it.
Yeah, I think that's always quite an interesting indication of what.
I just hate it.
Yeah. You're not a fan, are you, Lou?
No, I don't know. I'm like I do what you do. Like sometimes I get it, and I have stuff that's Saint Laurent and it is nice. It makes me feel good, but I look at it and I'm like, it makes me a bit sad, because I think like Saint Laurent was so innovative and so amazing, and then I look at it and I question what we're celebrating. I look at those kind of boys and it makes me depressed that they wear Saint. If you're like, oh, those other kind of boys that wear Saint Laurent, well, I'm like, well, they're like 17-year-olds in a band, so like who's buying it for them? It just makes me feel a bit lame. It's like, what are we celebrating? Like spoiled boys that want to play the guitar. It just makes me angry. I just find it really like.
But that's also part of the story. I mean, for me to write about it, the fact it makes people angry it then makes it interesting for me that this thing that happens. Like I say, we're like we're cut out. There's a connection. That's what we were saying with Bobby yesterday about Instagram.
But I don't agree that the connection. I agree that it's one of those labels. I think they've very cleverly created a veneer that it is for these people and they buy it, and this is this cool Eddie's gang, all these kids.
Oh no, it's exactly the same as Dior. Like Dior, the boys were young on the catwalk, but the man that buys it is in his 50s. Like and that's the cleverness about the cut as well, is that it can be worn by older men.
But I don't know if I respect that boy, and then I don't know if I think that shopper who just wants a spangly bolero, I don't know if I respect them either. So that's why I get stuck with it.
If he wants a nice blanket.
But you look at it, and I think that's why. Whereas I am intrigued by the Drees man, and I'm intrigued. There's something a bit more like smart about it. Whereas I look at this and I'm like, that boy's probably really boring. He's the kind of person you get stuck next to at like a festival toilet and has nothing to say.
I think the Saint Laurent stores feel like an event. I feel the way that when the clothes go in new season, it's really like, oh wow, that's a new season. It feels really like up, and that doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah, very true.
We've not talked about Givenchy.
I
We've
know,
not talked
we
about
should.
like Paul Smith. We've not talked about like.
We were talking about Ceriti before, which is interesting because I think that was like a surprise one that everyone was quite intrigued by as well. There's a lot of stuff in Paris that I think was interesting. Do you want to talk? Should we talk? We haven't talked about Lanvin either. Should we talk about? What should we talk about?
We haven't talked about Walter, but I could just say Walter was brilliant. We don't need
Walter
to look at it.
was
Walter was amazing. That's it.
Yeah.
Givenchy was interesting.
Yeah, let's look at Givenchy, because the one thing I've been thinking about a lot is the way that people used to say about Milan being the city of business, and everyone goes to Milan for business, and Paris is about pleasure. But I've become more and more aware of like the way buyers act, which is they come to the Milan shows, everyone's has the longest lunches ever because there's nothing to go and see, and then they get to Paris and straight away they're like, right, 8 a.m. meeting, this is, and then they spend like 2 weeks in Paris buying after the shows, then they go to Milan for like a day or something and do their buy, and they go back to Paris. Like Paris is business now, and whenever you say to people what are your biggest labels, they're like Saint Laurent, Balmain, Givenchy.
Yeah.
And Paris is menswear at the moment in terms of sales. Like obviously it's got a big problem. There's nothing new like in London, but in terms of the market, it's Paris, and it's this. Disgust.
Don't stop just by eating a Coke.
No, but it's fascinating that this is the biggest seller, isn't it? It's the.
Do you agree with that statement based on?
Yeah, I mean, those three brands that Charlie just said, Balmain, Givenchy and Saint Laurent, are hugely successful for matches. I mean, I checked in with Damien actually about this collection because I
Who's your buyer? Yeah.
Yeah, Damien, who's the head of menswear at Matches and buys all the stuff. And I just said to him, how did you feel about it? Because I liked the floral, full head to toe floral look. And but I don't know, when I was looking at it I was thinking this doesn't have quite so much buzzy, editorially, fashiony things in it, and obviously Givenchy has a strong tailoring side to it too. But Damien said he really liked the collection, thought it was really strong, and there were lots of things in the showroom that he really wanted to buy, and he bought quite into the floral. But I said, was there more jazzier prints like that they didn't put on the runway that they were in the showroom? And he was like, no, not really. It was quite like this.
But there are in pre-collection, aren't there? Pre-collection is full of jazzy.
Yeah.
So
It's
and pre-collection is the thing
stuff.
that so that stuff will be there. It's not that it's got rid of that.
Yeah.
It just is the catwalk message. I think they're trying to hone away from.
Yeah.
They're trying to create a different idea for us to see anyway.
I think it felt a bit like a treading water collection, which was interesting because I think we said this yesterday. It's a lot of what Milan was about is people defining what they do, and to me this felt like Givenchy being like, this is what we do.
Can we stop here? Like this beyond treading water, like this, a white polo shirt with white jeans, and the only thing that was up with it, if you look very closely on the left arm, there's a funny pocket. And it was literally like, is that really a catwalk look?
Yeah.
Like it was a really, it's not, the thing with, I've always found with Givenchy is that you can always see from the house how much budget they put into the factory and stuff, and Givenchy doesn't, it's not a house of luxury, let's say, in that way. You know, the t-shirts are quite printed like that, and it was just a kind of white polo shirt with white jeans, and it felt
like half a collection to me.
Yeah.
Like there's the gypsophilia print and all the pearls and stuff that kind of taps into more of the women's couture, but I didn't really like it. I don't think it.
Yeah.
Other Givenchy collections that really smack you around the face and like that's
It did feel like it
that's the
needed
thing.
an edit for the show, for sure.
It just felt like it didn't feel like there was much. When I say treading water, I kind of mean it felt like studio had done it. It didn't feel like it was a kind of like, we're going to do this is what we're saying. It felt like.
I find most head to toe looks in white quite eye roll inducing anyway. There's so many of them, but like they really drive me nuts because I'm just like, no one wears head to toe white, no one.
Yeah.
Why this constant head to toe? There was so much of it actually, and it's just like, I think obviously you can use it in the context of a show to make a punctuation point, or you know, to break something up, or to make a statement about shape or something. But when it's literally like, as Charlie was saying, a polo shirt and white, you know, it is like, really?
There's interesting because do you remember when Marc Jacobs did that, like all the like the sweaters and that kind of Victoriana collection? He was like, oh, because like no one wears all white. Who are these women that wear all white? Kind of commenting about Celine. And then the next season he did all that like head to toe. That's quite funny. But yeah, Givenchy's an interesting. I think, but it is what it is, isn't it? It's one of those ones where you kind of think like, I think it does sell really well and people get it, so they're kind of. In a way, it's moved out of fashion, and in a sense, it's kind of. I always find that quite interesting when brands become really successful and they kind of own a moment and a look, because then they have to kind of stop being part of the fashion conversation and just do that for a while.
It's interesting because the show is on it's on okay. It's like 6 p.m. It doesn't, you know, it's a big production. There was an art piece in the middle of the catwalk.
The music is
so loud. But the thing is, it doesn't feel like the show of the week where everyone's.
No.
I mean, there's loads of kids outside trying to get in because there's people are obsessed with it. But
I think that's because the celebrities are there. I think that's not.
No, I think also they're all dressed in Givenchy. Like I think
Yeah.
to fashion kids outside, it's like that. But actually inside the show, I don't think they want it to be a fashion moment in that
No.
way. There's no sense of a kind of a heightened feeling in that way. It does feel like here's the next kind of product.
Which I think is what quite a lot. Maybe you guys don't agree. I think quite a lot in Paris felt like that.
What like?
Like L'Enfant, like.
Yeah.
You know, whereas the shows that we talked about, like Com and Raf,
Yeah.
felt like it was something else.
Yeah.
But everything else felt a little bit more like this is what we do.
Yeah. But then they're brands who've expanded to a point where they move away from a kind of individual handwriting already to become brands that have to supply product to stores in mass number.
This would definitely have benefited from another element.
Yeah. It just feels like it's missing a whole. Like they just left a whole bit behind.
Maybe they did. Maybe something got lost en route or something. You never know.
It's weird. I felt like kind of ambivalent about it, whereas before I've been really like, oh my god, and it was weird. I think other people were more like, oh my god.
I just don't like the naked girls. We talked about this yesterday, so I'm not going to go over it again. But it's just like, I find it quite boring.
Yeah.
Is there anything I've missed that really stood out?
I want to say how good Paul Smith was, because I did think that was a really good show, and I think his shows previously have been a bit kind of, he's just not had a kind of conviction about them. Like, you go into the Paul Smith show, it's always nice to see Paul, and here's some nice clothes, and you move on. Whereas this really felt like it got 4 or 5 or 6 kind of different ideas they developed, and they all put together in a really, really neat and desirable way. It felt really luxury in a way, in an old-fashioned sense of the word. Like, it felt like a luxury show. It felt really elevated.
I like that new venue that they're using,
the
like
boards,
that showing around like that, rather than the just up and down catwalk.
And they got illustrations by Fergus Purcell. That's by Fergus. And if you keep going down, there's all these kind of like cactuses with happy faces on or stuff.
Yeah,
or
I like the banana
and
stuff.
stuff.
I thought it was quite sexy.
It was really great to see the brand developing that way. I thought it was a great show.
Did you like it, Simon?
Yeah, I did like it. I liked the fact that it's loosened itself up a little bit. There were a few things in it that I thought were a bit awkward. The sort of fringing stuff.
Yeah, the fringing.
I found a bit peculiar, and I'm not hugely sold on the idea of a satin trouser. But it definitely feels to me like it's developing in a nice way, and that it's a little bit more fashion than it used to be, but not too much.
And you've got those little ballet shoes, slippers again.
There's a fun factor about it as well, which I think is kind of important, because Paul Smith, that is his personality, that he is the brand, that kind of quirky fun, and so you do need those banana jumpers, and you do need a set with like, some plants, and the invite's like music a little thing that you put into your plant pot. Like it's his brand, and I think that you've got to have a bit of that. I also think there's lots of things in there that are incredibly wearable and people will want to buy.
What really surprised us this season then? I want to sum up the mood of Paris, and it feels like we've agreed that Com and Raf kind of shocked us and surprised us and delighted us. Was there anything else how do we all come away feeling? Was it a strong season?
Slouchy.
Yeah.
With my kind of confusion.
It's probably because you're just really tired.
Well, there was definitely a bit of that, yeah. But no, I think that the mood of it, I thought it was a good season, in the sense that it felt like it was moving in a slightly looser, more relaxed direction, which has obviously been happening for a little while. But I think this idea of it all kind of undoing a little bit is kind of good.
And that feels relevant, doesn't it? It feels like for a while fashion is so separate to what men are wearing, and I think you don't want all fashion to be clothes, but you do want fashion to feel relevant.
Yeah.
I find Paris so invigorating.
Do you?
Yeah, and it's such a pleasure to be able to see these shows, and to like, I'm guessing you don't have Undercover because it's such a small, but like Undercover came for the first time to Paris, and his collection was so good, and Jim was there, and it's so nice to chat with him again, and like his collection was based on the Robert Mapplethorpe cover for Television's Marquee Moon album, and other things as well.
Which is amazing, because everyone was going to see Mapplethorpe.
Exactly,
as well.
which was the most amazing exhibition, and but it's so good to have his point of view and his humour in the city, and to have a day where you're now going to go see him, and right now you're going to go to the Com showroom, and the fact you get to actually be around these people and to talk about stuff.
There's a smallness to Paris, which is interesting. What you were just saying about the big business side is that you kind of go to Milan and you feel very anonymous in Milan, and everything feels very separate. And then in Paris, it feels a bit more like that London vibe, where you can potter backstage, say hi to people. Everything's a bit more.
But it's also that thing as well, like you start the day not knowing what you're going to see, and at the end of the day, it's like, oh wow, I've seen that, I've seen that, and it's when it's a flat day like the Saturday with the Kenzo hoo-ha and the
damp Kenzo.
Yeah, like Saturday's always a hard day to get through, but when you have a hard day in Paris, you're like, oh my god, like because you're so used to it being so up and just the pleasure of being around people who are creative and individual and of strong opinion and have found a way to express that through fashion.
Says it all, doesn't it? Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Excellent roundup. Should we give them a clap? Because I feel like everyone tried hard this season. It was very good, and I want to clap for Raf again.
I'm going to clap for.